Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. We're back from break, and let's just get right into it. We're going to start off with One Piece. Well, that was a fun chapter. Overall, it was more ridiculous, which isn't a bad thing. So the chapter starts at the cover page, which is Pound still going after Lola and Chiffon after they're leaving. He's swimming, so we'll find. Hopefully that's the conclusion next week, but or next chapter, as One Piece is on break next week. So, well. Then it goes to Kaido versus the Mink, and Jack actually shows up too, so it gets all of the closure for the Mink getting able to fight Kaido and Jack. Raizo then says he was the one that Jack was looking for, and all the Mink turn Sulong, namely the two kind of bodyguards to Nekomamushi, and then the Three Musketeers, and then we see all of them turn into Sulong form, but Jack and even one of the numbers aren't phased by that, and the battle up on the top of Onigashima begins in earnest. Then we go back to the party down below, where Shinobu's trying to get Momo out of the execution block, but it doesn't work. She's caught, and King throws her away. Everyone's concerned, but then the chains end up breaking, which confuses everyone. But then Momo's floating, King attacks, and it ends up being Sanji, who grabbed him. He's in full raid suit form. He throws Momo to Shinobu, and more or less Sanji calls him a man for the way he said his name proudly. Shinobu gets away, but then King and Sanji end up more or less fighting, though it's not looking super great as Luffy's concerned. Luffy tells Yamato to go after and protect Shinobu and Momo, and Shinobu with an excellent line asking if he can. Then, this is his literal quote, "Alright, it's only natural he's my son after all." It's what an idiot. Then it's Luffy versus Big Mom a little bit, as she charges at him with Napoleon drawn, hitting a good Ivanko sovereignty, blowing up a huge hole in the fortress. Everyone's realizing that it's not good. She tries to call Zeus, but Nami is still holding on to Zeus, and it seems to some degree they developed some sort of friendship, which is actually really funny. But with that being said, Big Mom ends up grabbing Zeus out of Nami's hands and then tells Zeus he'll disappear if he holds back against Nami, so Zeus apologizes but still goes on with the attack. But finally Brook and Frankie roll in and save Nami by running over Big Mom and cutting Zeus in half. Now we're gonna get Big Mom versus simply spectacular. That's why Frankie's best Straw Hat. And Brook. He keeps being the foil to Big Mom, and it's great. So that was the chapter. Rather short one this week, but it was still, I found it fairly fun and entertaining, so I'm not sad. And the fighting just keeps getting bigger and bigger, so you can't be too wrong. I would give that chapter a solid B. That was a fun chapter overall. Now we're moving on to My Hero. Well, now next week is 100% a must read, because things are about to go from bad to infinitely worse. The chapter starts off with Shigaraki still repeating the words his father said about how heroes only hurt their own family, or heroes hurt their own family just to keep complete strangers safe, and more or less that he has that, I guess, conviction maybe might be the right word, but I don't know if that's true or not. But the truth of the matter is that he has a will to keep fighting. As the other heroes continue to help Eraser keep his eyes open, everyone's seeing that Shigaraki still has power to fight on, and more or less he explains that he sees what Hero Society did, which was more or less have it where everyone pushes off trying to help others to heroes and the police and so on, seeing as how he himself was a helpless kid and no one helped him because they all thought a hero would do it. He says everything's rotten and he plans on destroying it, as everyone keeps sort of scapegoating into the heroes, they'll fix everything and so on. More or less he has simple stuff, and then he explains that he doesn't care that if they understand him, and that's what makes them heroes and villains, different ideals that neither side understand. Endeavor goes on for the attack, more or less ignoring his speech, but Shigaraki is more or less ready and back in action as Gran Torino goes in to try to stop him, but Shigaraki overpowers him, grabs him by the foot, and it's not looking good at all. Everyone goes in to try to help Gran Torino, even Deku and Bakugo, but it's not looking good. And we get a flashback of Shigaraki's grandmother leaving his dad as she more or less goes away, and she explains why she did it. It's Shigaraki's grandmother, who I don't remember her name, but it's fine. And Gran Torino, as she's explaining it, and now he's wondering if they made a mistake, which I have questions, but I'll leave them as questions. A lot of stuff is implied. The only thing I do know is I think Gran Torino's dead, as Shigaraki seemingly punches a hole through his stomach, as you see, I think he's dead, and then Shigaraki takes the power, it seems, because the next instance, he's faster than everyone. Oh my. Yeah, I think he took Gran Torino's power. Whether killing him or not, I think the injuries are enough to kill him, but he goes heads right for Aizawa. Then Ryuko, the dragon woman, comes in to stop him, but he got one of his hands through her hand as he keeps trying to push forward. Deku ends up jumping on his back to try to stop him, saying he won't forgive him for that, but Shigaraki won't forgive anyone, so he doesn't really care. Stiff elbow to the rib. He puts on the black whip, and Endeavor is coming in for one last good punch, but as it looks like things might go the hero's way, it goes right back as Shigaraki's hand pushes through Dragon Lady's. Yes, he pulls out the Erie's, power bullets where it gets rid of powers, and he is aiming it at someone. And now that I look at it again, I think he's going for Aizawa, which would 100% spell the end. Everyone there, it would be completely over. So next week is 100% a must read. Wow, that chapter gets an A, and I'm looking forward to next week. With that, we're going to move on to Jujutsu Kaisen. Well, that was a good chapter. It was a big fight chapter for what was going on. Sukuna took on whatever the Megumi summoned, that devil, cursed spirit, whichever it is. So Sukuna fights the cursed spirit, and they go one-on-one. Sukuna looks like he has the advantage early on, but then the cursed devil ends up turning the wheel on his back and heals. They then fight and continue, but it starts to deflect Sukuna's attacks and even hit him, quote-unquote. Well, he does hit him, but I don't know if it damages him in any way. But the hit pushes him through, several buildings. 4, the 5th one where he lands. Cursed Spirit continues after him, but Sukuna dodges and beats him down again pretty good, and he expects him to get back up, which he does, and the wheel turns again, and Sukuna more or less figures out what's happening, and figures out that this Cursed Spirit is more or less his ability is to adapt to all phenomenon, as it says quite literally there. And again, the next, quote-unquote, it reads, the ability to adapt to any and all phenomenon, kind of like the late throw in rock, paper, scissors, meaning he more or less takes a hit, adapts, and you can't hit him with the same thing again. He more or less is saying if it was the old him and or when he first showed up and fought Megumi back early in the story, he would have beaten him, but now he has to try something else, and he does a domain expansion, which his looks quite malicious. It is the male violent shrine. So it looks like things are heating up there, which is interesting. Just fairly good. So that's good in general. I give that one a solid B. It was a good fighting chapter overall. So now we're going on to the first of 2 new series, though this one is only a limited series. It's Burn the Witch by Tite Kubo, which was the mangaka of Bleach, doing a limited series. So thought I'd give it a shot, as I did read it. Oh boy, it's a really long chapter. Well, we'll see what we can do. So, yep, we're on to Burn the Witch. Well, that was a very large chapter, which again aren't necessarily bad, though in truth, a large chapter. They tend to, I don't know, they don't tend to fit in the weekly format. But anyway, it was a good chapter. Again, from what I know, it's only a 4-chapter limited series, which will be interesting if this is just another setup one, like the one-shot he put out, which is more or less the backstory of this chapter. And I wonder if he's just going to keep doing sort of limited series of this as it goes. Because again, 4 chapters seems too little for it, but we'll see. So it starts off by we meet one of the 3 main characters in their normal life, as it explains more or less what's going on, her disposition with things, perhaps, I'm not too certain. But everything is more or less, she's walking around, so on and so forth. She then goes into, the magical side of London, which we find out is reverse London, and we find out her name is Ninny Spencole. So, we see that, and we meet the other main character. She's from what it says, and we learn later, is doing a mission hunting some sort of deer dragon thing, which then another seemingly leaf pig bat dragon shows up, but she gets rid of that, and then Ninny shows up and saves the other main character and the deer dragon, and we find out both their names. Well, more officially anyway. And the other one is Noelle Nihashi. Noelle Nihashi is the other girl who got the deer. And so on. They're partners in their magical sort of, I guess, group, the wing band type of thing. It explains more of the sort of lore of the world, about how dragons more or less do exist, but then you can't normally see them. So it's up to the reverse London to sort of take care of them. They get back. We find out that they have to sort of put in that they finished the jobs and so on and so forth to get the money and achievement points, which we find out each one, Noelle's priority is money, Ninny's priority is achievement points because she wants to join a more advanced class of magical, I guess more or less knight to some degree. And the third main character, Balgo, and his dog dragon, Sushi. They were going to ignore it, but then their former boss, who was fired apparently, as they say in the chapter, tells them they kind of have to go, and that he got them overtime for watching over Balgo, and so then they actually go off and do it, and they explain again that one is for money, one is for the achievement points, and then they say if anyone asks, they're doing it for social justice, which is ridiculous. Balgo ends up crashing in Osushi into a building, which a person's living in, but he's fine. We learn that normal citizens can't interact with dragons. It's against the law, and they'll actually be killed, which is oddly severe. They say Balgo is then saved by Ninny and Noelle, but he only thanks Noelle, even though it was actually Ninny who saved him. Yes, it was Ninny who saved Balgo, and then Noelle actually only saved Osushi, as playing with him calms down the little dog and so on. Then we find out that there's a test that normal citizens have to take and to see if they've been infected, and the guy was not. However, we find out that we learn more about it, and we see that Balgo is what is known as a dragon clad, which is that they've been infected by dragons, and we learn that they have a strong tendency to attract other dragons and so on. And then a dragon shows up and attacks them. They fight it off, only for it to end up not being a normal dragon, but being what is known as a dark dragon. After half of its face slides off, it attacks. They more or less call it in that things are really bad. They call it in, but then they still decide to attack the dragon head on, because Ninny wants to become what is known as a saber, which is more or less dragon hunters, and Noelle doesn't, but she has no real choice in the matter. They explain more about how dragons feed off of negative emotions and can turn into dark dragons who want to hurt humans, where normally dragons only hurt people if they're hungry, otherwise they don't. She attacks full strength. We then meet the leadership of Wingbind, who are called the Top Horns. We meet all of them and who they are, and they're once complaining it's a catastrophe, and they more or less sort of go on whether it's a century or not since the last attack of a dark dragon. They're trying to figure out what to do, and they want to get rid of Balgo. And then they ask the leader of basically the Punishment Corps, and they decide that they're finally going to get rid of Balgo. So that was that. It's a hefty chapter, all said and done, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I would give it a solid B, as again, it's introducing the world and so on, and I am interested to see how it goes, so I'll be interested to read next week and see where it ends up going from there. Now, I'm actually going to throw this in here now. I'm going to go on to Black Clover. Well, things just took a turn. The chapter starts off with everyone back at the capital, where the royal healer is tending to Asta, who he says is actually okay, but he can't do anything about his left arm, which is all demonified because he gave it up to his devil. He doesn't know how to fix it, and the Golden Dawn are completely decimated. The doctor would have preferred to have other recovery mages look at it, but he can't because they're busy with the Golden Dawn. He's happy that the others only have minor injuries, and they're completely distraught, namely at the moment Finral, who says they were protected. Then Gray asks if Ghosh can get a proper look, and he's surprised, the medical doctor's surprised that his every tissue has been reassembled, but he said he knew he was impaled with a giant sword, and then he says this is beyond recovery, and he was fully almost reconstructed. He then tells Gray that her ability might not be just transformation, it might be some super healing, which is interesting. Everyone else is disheveled and completely depressed after their vicious loss, and they're all told to rest up for now. Asta then wakes up in bed, sees his arm, which he could still use, which I was surprised. I thought it wouldn't be of use anymore, but no, he can still use it. He opens up his book and sees that Yami's sword is now a spell in his grimoire. He then goes to leave and wants to save Yami, but then someone stops him with their magic, stops Asta in his tracks. Asta then says he has to go save Yami. The guy says he can't, and explains he couldn't beat one of the devil hosts, as he says. He couldn't beat Dante, and he certainly can't beat the other two who are just as strong. And then he even says, even the devil you're counting on has given up on you. He goes on and says that Asta's not being courageous, he's just being stupid and reckless. He said, Asta then retorts saying he still just has to go. He has to save Yami. Then the newcomer says he should just leave him. Asta then says basically no, and says that newcomer doesn't even know a thing about Yami. Newcomer says he's familiar, and basically says he's an idiot. Shorthand. Asta, angry by the insult, grabs his swords and is going for an attack, but is completely stopped by the newcomer, and then he's more or less upset that he's not stronger. The newcomer then pulls back his hood and says that he likes Asta and starts growing a horn, and then it's revealed on the very last page that he is the vice captain of the Black Bulls, Noct, and he is going to teach Asta how to use devil powers, and that was a fun chapter right there. Wow. Well, it looks like everyone's getting another power up, but at this point I've almost stopped trying to predict Black Clover as well as Chainsaw Man, just because I don't know where it's going. It's kind of difficult to guess. I don't know, but it'll be now interesting to get to learn more about Noct and so on. So, I don't know if I gave that one a grade. I don't think I did. I'll give that chapter I'll give it a solid B as it keeps going and growing. So we'll see what next week brings. Now we're on to We Never Learn. Well, that makes the whole... Well, that was a fun chapter in general. Already this arc is considerably better, maybe because them being older makes the story more entertaining, because they're not too much older, they're only in their early 20s, but still. But the chapter starts as Noriyuki goes to school. He ends up yawning because he's up late at night. As he's watching his class, I guess, do gym, perhaps. They more or less make fun of him for yawning. Then there's now a rumor about him and Asumi dating, which is funny. He explains no, they're not, and then one of his students says he's too derpy to have a girlfriend, which is actually kind of funny. They then flash back to them continuing to work on her suturing skills, and she improves. She continues to tease him, and so on. We go back to the present. We see the one girl that he helped when she passed out the previous chapter. More or less, he continues to show that he's a fairly decent teacher, and the older teachers show up and then more or less appoint him as the health coordinator against his will. So then now he has to he has to get all the kids to the clinic to get certain things, I'm guessing, to some degree. So they all have to go get shots, a bunch of the younger kids. None of them want to, and more or less Asumi fails to give them their shots, and they end up running away, and she fails to get the shots, and Asumi's mother then says it's a good learning experience to how to deal with people for Asumi to learn. Then as Noriyuki's walking home, he sees all the children eating at some sort of small shop in the town, and they're about to run away thinking they're in trouble, when Noriyuki tells them to wait and explains how to more or less get a treat out of the wrapping pretty easily. Then they ask him a whole bunch of questions. He explains he was poor, so he understands more or less the importance of these treats. They then even ask that they were surprised that he was a kid once, which is funny, and he more or less makes himself more human to the kids, because they only know mostly old people, I guess, and he more or less lightens up with them. And then he finally gets home, and Asumi is wearing her old maid costume, and did all sorts of her, maid sweet stuff, which is, I guess, her treat for him helping her master suturing. He then is still more attracted to her, but then she now wants to practice injections onto him, which isn't very good, and a whole bunch of stuff, but then he figures out that she's actually afraid of having human patients. Then it goes into the next day, where now Noriyuki is standing guard and none of them are allowed to get away, which is actually really funny. Then Asumi starts having the kids talk about things they like to distract them, as she gives the shot to each of them, and then she's starting to give the shots out, and Asumi's mother asks Noriyuki more or less how he made Asumi more comfortable, and he more or less said just the trick of having just innocent conversation, and we flash back to Noriyuki telling her about all their likes and dislikes, and he explains how the reason her fear works and why she's so caring of a doctor is, I guess, because she's afraid and cares too much about them. He knows how capable she is of making sincere connections and so on, which gave her the confidence to do that. They all leave, and again, she still has whatever that weird sort of penguin thing she liked early on, like a keychain of some kind, with her, and she plans on doing more teasing of him. So that was a fun chapter. That was entertaining. I would give that one a solid B. I find these ones, especially this arc, more entertaining than the last few. So now we're on to Undead Unluck. Well, that was a chapter. That was a fairly interesting chapter. It starts off more or less where it left off, with Titania blasting Andy and Fuko up towards Unrepair. They more or less clash as Unrepair does like a blade slash with his I guess, artifact. Is I think what they're called. And Andy does his blood slash, which breaks the blade slash, but he finds out that because he's only half a torso, or he's only his torso, he can't be too defensive, otherwise he'll be in trouble. So they cause unluck by having Fuko kiss Andy on the cheek, which then Rip wants to kiss Latala, which is actually really funny, and she says no, more or less. He then explains a meteor is falling because of Fuko, and they need the new kid to be ready to stop Unrepair and company. Unrepair had enough waiting, sends another attack, where Andy drops Fuko and the kid down by Titania. Andy ends up making contact with Unrepair. The kid's afraid if he freezes up, where Andy's not worried at all, and more or less is putting his faith in them. He jumps up further above Unrepair to draw attention to the meteor, it looks like. But then Latala and Unrepair gather themselves, and the meteor misses because of her ability. It blasts into the ocean, which sends Andy flying, which was one part of their plan, which was to get more or less out of her sight and out of their mind. And then Andy would supercharge one of his finger bullets because he had faith in the others to help him. Unrepair thinks it's useless, as he more or less knows, and they're going to try that. He then goes in for an attack on Fuko and company, and Fuko helps the kid by more or less giving him comfort, and he does stop them right in their tracks. And then Andy, he also sees Andy, which stops Andy right in the field, or maybe he misses him, I don't quite see it quite clear, but it ends up causing something, which then Andy's able to get the shot off, which pierces right through Unrepair's chest, seemingly killing him, and he's surprised that folks like them exist, which are people who don't act in the interest of their own lives. So it was a good chapter. Very interesting, it was a very good chapter, entertaining in what they were doing, as they seemingly won, but we'll find out if they actually do or not. I think it might just cancel out the power before he's able to, I guess, fix himself. I'm not too certain, but it was a fun chapter nonetheless. I enjoyed it, and I would give that one another B. It was a good chapter. I enjoyed it. We're on to the second new series that I'm bringing into this, which is Mashle, Magic and Muscles. I highly recommend anyone read this one. It's hysterical. The best way I can put it is if you mash Mob and One Punch Man together and then put them in a universe that's similar to Black Clover and Harry Potter. Just let that sink in. Yeah, this one is absolutely incredible. So I have no idea if I explained it all that well, but I ended up starting to read this one last week during the break, and I enjoyed it, so I thought to bring it in here. This is chapter 27 of Mashle. So the chapter starts off with Mash fighting the masked guy and cracking that mask. I still don't think he has a name. Not that I remember. And revealing some sort of eye, he then comments that it's red and thinks he's bleeding and has no idea what the eye means and apologizes for that. The red-eyed guy explains that it's the evil eye that temporarily disables magic to all who fall under its gaze. So he became a pariah in the world because he takes away the most important thing in the world, which is magic. So for Mash, it's not useful, and he feels bad that that his opponent can't use the eye properly now because he's an idiot. The red-eyed guy explains he's a natural enemy of all magic users and feared and everything, even by his parents, and he says that someone like Mash couldn't understand him, that he wishes he was never born, the red-eyed guy, or Mash has never thought that, and then he uses Seconth, which is like a very powerful spell from what I can gather, like the next tier, and uses it as a force field to de-speed Mash and speed himself up, so then he starts attacking Mash pretty heavily. As Mash is too slow to counterattack, Mash then decides to instead smash the ground and split it and make like a cone, so now there's only basically forward and backward for him to go, which narrows it down, and now Mash can more or less fight toe-to-toe with him, and he wouldn't allow him to get away, so he stepped on his foot too to keep him there. So now he's gonna do his full attack Hurricane Rush. What a great chapter. In the context of everything, I'd probably give it a B, but wow, is that one of the more entertaining series in all of Shonen Jump right now. I hope that one has a long shelf life. So I thoroughly enjoyed that one. So with that, we're on the final series of today, which is Chainsaw Man. I got nothing for what just happened. So the chapter begins with Makima wanting an explanation from Denji on what being a dog means. And he more or less explains that him thinking is making him depressed, and he thinks if Makima more or less thinks for him, he wouldn't feel depressed or drained anymore. And so she starts asking him if he's sure about this, and he more or less acts on her command like a dog. He's satisfied with that. The doorbell rings, and Makima called power over. He then asks why, and then she says he mustn't think silly things, and he just barks or woofs. They go to the door together, and then she tells him to open the door because she's going to kill Power, and then he's confused. They walk towards the door. He's getting more and more confused and asks if she's joking, and then she more or less she asks him to open the door as he's remembering Poochie telling him don't open the door. She then reassures him he doesn't have to think and to trust her. He then opens the door and realizes his birthday's tomorrow and sees Power there. He says hey, and then the next page Makima just kills Power by blowing her entire torso away. Okay. Deji, just in complete shock, doesn't know what to do or say as Makima says that his hands are cold again, as he's still in shock, not knowing what to do, as Makima just smiles. Yeah, I'm glad I saved that one for last. Gonna need a long... okay. Yeah. That's all I've got for that. Yeah. I would give that chapter an A, and Makima is the devil. That's it for all the chapters. That's everything I've got for this week. If you enjoyed my ramblings and so on, leave a like, and yeah, have to see you all in the next one. Oh, and thank you for watching.